There are movies you watch once and forget.
Mayday! Mayday!
All right, now everybody, get in crash positions.
Danger.
And then there are movies that feel like they were shot directly into your bloodstream. Movies that don't just entertain you, they rewire something inside your brain. And in 1986, one movie didn't just entertain, it took over an entire generation. Top Gun, a film so explosively confident, so shamelessly glossy, and so aggressively 80s that it feels less like cinema and more like a 2-hour adrenaline hallucination. It was fast, loud, bright, sweaty, sunburnt, unapologetically patriotic, scientifically inaccurate, and somehow absolutely perfect. It didn't tiptoe into theaters. It blasted in, flipping tables, kicking doors open, and demanding that everyone immediately buy aviator sunglasses. The film didn't just influence fashion, it practically bullied America into wearing leather jackets. But behind all the jet fumes, volleyball sweat, synth music, and motorcycle revving lies a creation story so wild, so messy, so absolutely chaotic that the film's behind-the-scenes journey is almost more dramatic than Maverick flying upside down while flashing a Polaroid grin. Because the truth is, Top Gun should not have worked. It had too many rewrites, too much military red tape, too little planning, too much improvisation, too many egos, too many rules, and way too much sunlight obsession. And yet, against all logic, it became one of the most iconic films ever made. To understand how that happened, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. The moment Hollywood said, let's make a movie about fighter jets. Even though they didn't have access to a single fighter jet. Fighter jets, as it turns out, are not exactly lying around on Craigslist. You can't rent them, you can't lease them, you can't borrow them from your friend Steve who knows a guy. If you want real jets, real F-14 Tomcats, you need the Navy. And the Navy does not play around. When the filmmakers reached out, the Navy responded with, sure, you can use our jets, but you're going to play by our rules. And their rules were not suggestions.
That's a good technique. I like it. Imagine that, Jumbo and Flex are right here. Lieutenant Jim Ray and Lieutenant Mike Galpin are instructors here at Top Gun. They both flew as bad guys in the movie. They're pretty colorful guys. Let's sit here and see what they have to say.
They were not guidelines. They were not friendly reminders. Their rules were a binder so thick it needed its own passport. The Navy demanded control over how pilots were shown, how aircraft were portrayed, how missions were described, how deaths were explained, how accidents were filmed, and how every scene reflected on the real-life Navy. Hollywood wanted drama. The Navy wanted recruitment posters. Hollywood wanted characters who could fail. The Navy wanted characters who could fail, gracefully, if at all. If a pilot made a mistake in the script, it was rewritten. If a line suggested the Navy could improve on something, it vanished. If an accident looked like someone's fault, it was transformed into a mechanical malfunction. The Navy wasn't helping with the movie, they were co-authoring it. But ironically, that tight control is exactly what made Top Gun iconic. Because when the film hit theaters, the Navy suddenly became the coolest organization on the planet. Recruitment soared, not by 5%, not by 20%, but by 500%. The biggest jump the U.S. military had ever seen. The Navy immediately set up enlistment booths in theaters, so you could walk out of the movie, still shaking from the jet engine volume, and sign your name before your popcorn cooled. No other movie has ever had that effect. Not before, not since. But here's the twist. The first version of the script wasn't patriotic at all. It was dark. It was psychological. It focused on stress, trauma, fear, guilt, and the crushing pressure of aviation. It had moral ambiguity and realistic consequences. The studio read that draft and said, no. People come to the movies to escape their problems, not adopt new ones. So the script was rewritten into something big, bright, loud, fun, romantic, sweaty, and heavily filtered with golden sunsets. Essentially, less tragedy. More Tom Cruise, smiling in slow motion. Tom Cruise initially wasn't impressed. He didn't want to be in a flashy military recruitment blockbuster that didn't feel grounded. He wanted substance. He wanted emotional arcs. He wanted depth. So director Tony Scott had an idea, a dangerous idea. He arranged a flight for Cruise in a real Navy F-14 Tomcat, piloted by an actual instructor who knew exactly how to rearrange a human being's organs with G-forces alone. Cruise strapped in, the engine roared, the jet launched off the carrier, and then all hell broke loose. The pilot flipped the jet upside down, dove toward the ocean, spun it, rolled it, pulled G's so intense that Cruise probably saw 4 separate versions of himself questioning his life choices. When they landed, Cruise climbed out, pale, sweating, barely standing, looking like he had just survived something between a roller coaster and an exorcism. And with shaking hands, he said, "Okay, I'm in." That flight didn't just convince him. It unlocked something in him. It awakened the stunt-obsessed daredevil he would eventually become. The moment Tom Cruise almost passed out at 8 G's was the moment Maverick was born. Val Kilmer's road to Top Gun was, well, less spiritual. Kilmer didn't want the role. He didn't like the script. He didn't care for the tone, and he certainly didn't see the charm in playing a man whose personality was ice, but with cheekbones. But due to his contract, he had no choice. His disinterest, his aloofness, his subtle, permanent expression of, "I'm too good for this," that wasn't acting. That was Val Kilmer being Val Kilmer, and it turned out to be perfect. His natural distance made the rivalry with Maverick feel real, because it was real. While Tom Cruise was transforming into a jet-fueled adrenaline addict, Val Kilmer was transforming into something else entirely, the world's most believable rival. He didn't have to play an intimidating, cold, calculating pilot, because that was exactly how he felt on set. Kilmer viewed the film as a flashy commercial, and he wasn't shy about it. He kept a certain distance from the role, from the material, and yes, from Tom Cruise himself. And ironically, that emotional distance created one of the greatest cinematic rivalries of the decade. You can feel it on screen. The stiffness, the tension, the tiny insults hidden in polite Navy protocol. It wasn't scripted chemistry. It was 2 actors living completely different experiences. Cruise, electrified, driven, obsessed with flying. Kilmer, counting the minutes until the shoot wrapped. And yet those 2 energies fused into something unforgettable. Maverick and Iceman weren't written as mirror opposites. Were reaching freer mirror, Matasign, Wadasigns mirror. But they became that way because the actors were. That's the chaos magic of Top Gun. The things that weren't planned turned out better than the things that were. Meanwhile, director Tony Scott was operating on pure instinct. He didn't just chase sunsets, he hunted them like they were prey. His obsession with golden hour is legendary. If you watch the movie today, you might notice something. Every scene looks like a commercial for sunglasses. That wasn't an accident. That was Tony Scott sprinting across set, screaming, "We have 5 minutes of light! Get Tom on the bike! Now, now, now!" The famous motorcycle sequence? Not planned, not prepared, not even storyboarded. Scott saw the sky turn gold and panicked. Tom Cruise didn't even have time to rehearse. He just hopped on the bike and prayed he didn't crash as the camera car sped beside him. The result is one of the most iconic shots in film history, achieved by accident in 45 seconds. This is the essence of Top Gun's behind-the-scenes energy. Chaos delivered with confidence. But Scott's love for visuals didn't stop at sunsets. He wanted the jets to look like mythical beasts, shimmering metal monsters dancing across the sky. And to get that footage, he pushed limits the Navy thought were sacred. One day, when filming on the aircraft carrier, he noticed the sun hitting the planes at the wrong angle. He needed the ship rotated. The captain said no. Fuel costs, operational risks, military priorities. You know, normal reasons you don't turn a 90,000-ton war machine on a whim. But Tony Scott was not normal. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his personal checkbook, and wrote a check for $25,000 right then and there and handed it to the captain. "Turn the ship," he said. The captain, to his credit, did not laugh. He simply handed the check back and said, "Movie or no movie, sir, this ship isn't a prop." Tony was escorted away. But even in defeat, he got part of what he needed. The light held long enough for one last shot. You have to respect a man willing to bribe a Navy captain with his own money for better cinematography. The Navy wasn't just strict. They were everywhere. If a line suggested the Navy made mistakes, gone. If an accident implied pilot error, rewritten. If a character questioned orders, softened. They didn't just want cooperation, they wanted perfection. And yet, the strangest irony is that this rigid control helped create something iconic. By scrubbing away the realism, the fear, the moral complexity, they allowed the movie to become something else entirely, a myth, a fantasy, a 2-hour dream of what flying feels like, not what it actually is. The Navy unknowingly helped build Hollywood's most effective commercial, one so powerful, it reshaped an entire generation's view of military aviation. Recruitment went up by 500%. A number so absurd it sounds made up, but it happened. The film didn't just portray the Navy, it immortalized it. But not all the control was glamorous. Sometimes it was frustrating, especially when it came to the film's emotional core, Goose. The screenplay originally portrayed his death as a consequence of human error, a tragic but honest reality of flying high-performance aircraft. But the Navy said, absolutely not. No pilot was to blame, no system was flawed, no decision was questionable. So the writers had to engineer a completely blameless accident, one that hit audiences hard, but didn't put responsibility on any character or process. That's why the final version feels so sudden, so shocking, so emotionally chaotic, because it was. On set, the scene devastated the cast and crew. Anthony Edwards delivered a performance that was raw and painful, grounding the film in something deeper than the gloss. And Tom Cruise, for all his confidence, all his bravado, delivered one of the most vulnerable moments of his career. Behind all the jets, all the adrenaline, all the over-the-top 80s attitude, Goose's death gave the film a heart, even if that heart had to pass Navy editing first. The bar serenade scene, that moment where Maverick and his wingman serenade Charlie with "You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin'," that wasn't carefully planned either. The crew didn't have a song picked. Nobody could agree on anything. They were running out of time. Chaos was erupting. Then someone yelled, "Just use the Righteous Brothers song." And everyone shrugged. Sure, why not? What resulted was a scene so iconic that bars today still recreate it. The actors didn't rehearse. They had no choreography. They just went for it. And that's the magic of the whole movie. The things nobody planned became the things nobody forgets. The strange thing about Top Gun is that the moments people remember most, the moments burned into pop culture memory, were never supposed to happen. They were the result of creative panic, time pressure, lucky accidents, and a cast that often had no idea what they were about to film until someone yelled, "Action!" Take the volleyball scene, the sun-soaked, slow-motion, oil-glazed spectacle that has lived in the cultural bloodstream for nearly 4 decades. Nobody planned for it to become a landmark of 80s cinema. It wasn't even in the script until the studio executives walked onto set, looked around, and said something like, "We love the jets, we love the danger, but could we get something a little more? Abs forward ? The result was a montage that feels like someone challenged the cast to play volleyball as if they were auditioning for the cover of a fitness magazine. The actors had trained for weeks, strict diets, hardcore workouts, tanning, only for Tony Scott to film the entire sequence in barely half a day. And after all that preparation, the final cut lasts roughly 90 seconds. But those 90 seconds, they became legendary. Scott later admitted he didn't care about the volleyball. What he cared about was the light. He wanted the sand to glow, the bodies to shimmer, the air to sparkle like golden dust. He wanted the scene to feel like a dream of California, captured right at the edge of sunset. And ironically, it worked far better than anyone expected. Then there's the romance, something the filmmakers originally wanted to avoid. They thought the story didn't need a love subplot. They thought the adrenaline and rivalry and jet-powered tension were enough. But test audiences disagreed violently. They wanted a love story, they wanted chemistry, they wanted a kiss. So the studio ordered new scenes, including the famous elevator moment, months after filming ended. Kelly McGillis had already changed her hair for another role. Tom Cruise looked slightly different too. The lighting in the elevator was completely wrong for the rest of the film. None of it matched. Tony Scott didn't care. He turned off half the lights, added shadows, and shot the whole thing in a haze that conveniently covered every continuity error. And somehow, it became one of the most intimate moments in the film. Charlie herself, Maverick's love interest, wasn't fictional. She was based on a real woman, Christine Fox, a brilliant civilian analyst who later became the highest-ranking woman in the history of the U.S. Department of Defense. She was analytical, confident, sharp-witted, and widely respected. In other words, she was exactly the kind of woman who could keep up with someone like Maverick. Her presence grounded the film in reality, at least for a moment, because while the jets, the stunts, and the bravado painted Top Gun as a fantasy, Charlie reminded audiences that intelligence, strategy, and discipline were just as important as speed. She wasn't there to be impressed. She was there to be challenged. And that dynamic, that subtle tension between Maverick's impulsiveness and Charlie's precision, gave the movie a spark it didn't know it needed. What really keeps Top Gun alive, though, is the constant tug-of-war between chaos and control. For every moment the Navy tried to tighten the movie's image, the filmmakers seemed to slip in something spontaneous. Something messy, human, and unforgettable. And nowhere is that clearer than in Maverick and Charlie's dynamic. Their romance wasn't polished. It wasn't tidy. It wasn't the kind of love story that fits neatly into a formula. It was unpredictable and impulsive, a reflection of the entire production. And that same unpredictable energy carried into the cockpit. The Navy provided flight instructors to monitor every detail, yet the filmmakers still found ways to push the envelope. They wanted jet footage that felt violent, exhilarating, disorienting, footage that made audiences grip their armrests. So pilots flew dangerously close, banked steep angles, and performed maneuvers that made the camera operators question their life choices. Every frame feels alive because, in many ways, it was. The cameras shook for real. The actors struggled to stay conscious for real. The pilots flew like their careers depended on it, because sometimes they actually did. That blend of real danger and cinematic ambition created an energy you can still feel decades later.
In the end, Top Gun became far more than a movie. It became a symbol, a snapshot of the 80s sealed in jet fuel and sunlight. It captured everything people loved about that era. The confidence, the rebellion, the music, the danger, the romance, the impossible sunsets, and somehow, through all the chaos behind the scenes, it became a film that still feels alive every time you watch it. When Maverick races toward the runway, when the engines roar, when the sky opens up and the jets climb into the clouds, you feel something. Something young, something fearless, something that whispers that maybe, just maybe, you could fly too. Or at least live with the same reckless passion. That's the magic of Top Gun. It never tries to be real. It tries to make you dream. And even decades later, it succeeds. So if you enjoy diving into the wild, unpredictable story behind this legendary film, make sure to hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into cinema's most iconic worlds, and let us know in the comments. What's your favorite Top Gun moment?
The jets, the volleyball, the music.
Or Tom Cruise proving that gravity and height are merely suggestions? Thanks for watching.
And remember, somewhere out there, Maverick is still flying too fast, too low, and always, always against the rules.